Hey everyone, Sarah here, coming to you from the second day of the World Parkinson Congress here in Kyoto, Japan. And in this video, I am going to share with you the golden nuggets that I gleaned from today's conference, the workshops, and the speakers, so that you can take them and immediately implement them in your daily life if you weren't able to make it to Kyoto. So to make this super easy for you, if you haven't watched the recap videos before, you can check out the description box below this video, and there will be timestamps for different topics that I cover. So if you're interested in a specific topic, then you can just click on the blue link and it'll take you right to the portion of this video that you're interested in. So you can watch what you want and cut out the rest of the fluff. So before I get started, if you're watching this video, thank you so much for tuning in. Give this video a good like and make sure you're subscribed, which I'll put maybe over here in the video. Click that subscribe button and make sure you get notified of new videos when I go live. So also in the description box below is going to be any links to any resources that I mention from the speakers for today or from Invigorate's archives. So easy enough, let's go ahead and get started. Today was an amazing day, and we started with a talk about mitochondria, and those are just the energy producing cells in your body. They're the cells that are responsible for taking in the nutrients that you consume, changing them into something useful for your body, and then using it to create energy. And the main takeaway of the first topic that I attended was that in Parkinson's, the way that your cells are able to process energy, process nutrients to create energy is impaired. And fortunately, there are multiple kind of links to help your body produce energy. One pathway might be a little bit decreased, I think. Without going into all the big jargon, the complex 1 activity in Parkinson's patients was reduced by 30% compared to the control. So that just means that one pathway for your cells to make energy is impaired because of a Parkinson's process that's going on, but there are other ways to create energy for your cells and give you energy. So the main takeaway, he had a lot of pharmaceutical interventions that he recommended that may help with off state specifically. But in this video, all I really want to encourage you to do is to take care of your mitochondria, and that has to do with eating right, which we'll talk about at the end of this video. I attended a talk by Dr. Lori Mishley where she talked about nutrients and Parkinson's, and that might be a good place to go if you're suffering from low energy or fatigue. The best way to take care of your mitochondria is to eat well and feed it good nutrients. So we'll get there. But hopping into topic 2, I ended up at a workshop about cognitive decline and dementia for Parkinson's, and talked about the research, and we also talked about some techniques that may help with cognitive decline. So if you are out there and you feel like your cognition is getting a little bit glitchy at times, you may be wanting to tune in for this topic, because there is cognitive decline and then there's dementia, and those two aren't necessarily 100% linked with Parkinson's. You can have cognitive dysfunction or you can have dementia. Cognitive decline can kind of turn into dementia for some patients, which we'll talk about, but some clients, and you might be one of them, in the research is showing you can have a cognitive impairment, but actually get back to normal cognitive functioning and not develop dementia. So the talk was by Dr. Carolyn Gray. She was Carolyn Williams Gray, I believe, from Cambridge. She's an amazing speaker. She was talking about cognitive decline does include but does not exclusively mean dementia. 30% of people diagnosed with Parkinson's will develop dementia, according to her numbers, whereas milder cognitive impairment only affects between 20 and 40% of people diagnosed with Parkinson's. So they're kind of separate groups, and you may be wondering a little bit more about cognitive impairment and kind of how to classify. Should you be worried about cognitive impairment? Should you be worried about these things that are going on with your mind? So something that I wanted to cover, which was covered in this talk, is that what classifies as cognitive decline versus normal aging, and at what point does it actually become a problem? Because you can have glitches in memory sometimes, but it's not enough to derail you from your daily life. And that was the qualification that she gave as far as knowing when cognitive impairment is actually a quote-unquote problem, is if you are having cognitive impairments, which could include executive function, like planning and organizing tasks, managing your finances, or learning new technology, if you're easily distracted, have difficulty multitasking or troubles with attention, if you have memory deficits, if you have trouble reading maps or you get lost easily, that might be a cognitive impairment, or if you have difficulty with language finding. These can all be forms of cognitive impairment, and they may be related to Parkinson's, they may just be related to aging, they may be related to other things having nothing to do with either of those: medication, lack of sleep, dehydration. And the way that they diagnose it in the medical field is they'll put you through a series of tests. There are kind of two levels of testing. There's a level that your clinician can do in office, which has to do with paper tests and whatnot, and then a level 2, which is more imaging, to get an idea of really what's going on in your brain. So that's the diagnostic process. But for you, sitting at home wondering if your cognition is getting to a point where it's an issue, if you're no longer able to do your activities of daily living and it's putting you at risk for your health and wellness, that's when your cognition is really becoming a problem. So if you're driving and you suddenly realize you don't know where you are and you've been driving for a while, or you get lost just walking around your neighborhood, those types of things. If you are realizing that you thought you had this much money in your bank account and you just maybe balanced your checkbook wrong, that might be some keys that you might need to go to your neurologist, your movement disorder specialist, and get further testing to see what areas of cognition are really giving you trouble, and make sure that your treatment regime is kind of robust enough to cover some of these deficits. So then we moved into genetic risk factors for cognitive dysfunction and dementia. And I'm not going to dive too deep into this because I really want this to be something you can take away, but more or less different genetic profiles can affect whether or not you are at higher risk of developing dementia. And I'm not going to go into all the genetic prototypes here, genotypes rather, but cognitive dysfunction in Parkinson's, in specific areas of your brain, when you have mild cognitive impairment, it leaves you more likely to develop dementia. And then other people are a lot less likely to develop dementia. So we cover that, and if you want more details on that, I can definitely give you some more information. But there isn't a lot of reason for me to dive into it, since you really can't take it home. So let's get into something that you can actually apply today, which is environmental risk factors for Parkinson's and dementia. If you're watching this, you probably already have a Parkinson's diagnosis, or you are married to someone that does. But the risks, kind of the environmental risks, are if you've had a traumatic brain injury where you lost consciousness for more than an hour, that increases in your history. That increases your Parkinson's risk by 3.5 times. But actually, there's no increased risk of you developing dementia. So that I feel like is a good sign. I'm an ex-soccer, well, I'm still playing soccer, but for having a traumatic brain injury, that can include a concussion, that can include a fall where you hit your head and lost consciousness. That can put you at increased risk to develop Parkinson's, but not necessarily dementia. So that's can be a silver lining there. Smoking was actually found to decrease Parkinson's risk, but the speaker did not encourage anyone to take up smoking for that purpose, but it actually did not increase your risk of developing dementia. And then the third environmental risk factor for developing Parkinson's and dementia that they looked at was the chronic use of non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, or NSAIDs. And the research is showing that those who have chronic use of NSAIDs are not necessarily at an increased risk for Parkinson's, but it does put you at an increased risk for dementia by 1.7 times. And where that's really relevant is for those of you who have chronic pain and you've been using non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs for a long period of time. It may be a good thing to talk to your physician about because it may put you at an increased risk for dementia. Okay, moving right along to what predicts the development of Parkinson's dementia. And I want to give a little caveat here, which is this is what some of the research shows. It's not 100% guaranteed, but these are just some patterns in the research. And you can take them or leave them, but mainly this was a lot of conversation for healthcare providers. But I wanted to share it with you because I feel like it's important for you to know if you're interested or fearful about developing dementia. Now you have some information. So they talked about some predictors of developing Parkinson's dementia, and they were older age. So the older you get, the more likely you are to develop dementia. If you have a high UPDRS-3 scale of over 25 points, so when you go into the physician's office, they usually have you do, these tests. And that's part of the UPDRS scale. And so the specific UPDRS-3 is related to motor function. So if you have worse motor function, over the score of 25, you have a higher likelihood of developing dementia, Parkinson's dementia. Also, if you are having trouble with the pentagon copying test, so some of you might know what I'm talking about, but in the physician's office, they give you a pentagon to look at, and then you're supposed to recreate it, drawing it on another page. If you have trouble with that, you're more likely you have an increased chance of developing dementia. And then if you have trouble with semantic fluency, which is the test where they ask you to name as many items in a certain category as you can in 90 seconds. So I would ask you to name as many animals in 90 seconds as you can is the typical example. And if you have trouble with that, you're at more risk of your higher chance of developing dementia. It's not guaranteed, but these are the patterns in the research. And the opposite is true. If you are pretty good at copying the Pentagon test, if you're great at semantic fluency, naming all these items in a category in 90 seconds, then typically you're at lower risk of developing dementia. So then a great question was asked, which is our next topic, which is what are the ways that people with Parkinson's can reduce the risk for cognitive decline and or dementia? And there were 3 categories here. There were pharmacological interventions, there were kind of brain training, and then physical movement. So pharmacological interventions to reduce the risk of cognitive decline or dementia. I'm not going to go into here because I don't want anyone to be experimenting with your medications, but just know that there was a publication by Dr. Oken in the JAMA magazine or journal in 2017. And it just talked about the sequence of symptoms and progression of Parkinson's disease and the pharmacological treatment options. So depending on where you were in your Parkinson's progression and how it related to your cognition, there were some different medications that might be effective at helping with cognitive decline. And I'm going to leave that one up to your physicians to help you with. But one that might be better for you to implement on your own is this cognitive training, which is effective for cognitive decline in Parkinson's. And that could be, crossword puzzles. It could also be brain training games. I love to use brain training, word finding, games with my exercise programs because your brain is having to do something novel and build new skills. So cognitive training, if you're working with a Parkinson's physical therapist and they're asking you to walk and name any kind of fruit that you can for 30 seconds, that's cognitive training because you're having to do 2 things at once. So that's kind of an example. So if you're not doing any cognitive training with your exercise, give your personal trainer a little nudge and ask them if they can up that ante a little bit, or maybe do a little Google search, cognitive training for Parkinson's. And if I think of any resources between now and when I publish this video, I'll put them in the description below. Then the third way that you can reduce your risk for cognitive decline, which is the most potent, and the researcher said it outright on the stage, is exercise. I know you heard that coming, or saw that coming, but exercise is the best way to protect your brain and also restore some of the connections in your brain. So I'm probably preaching to the choir. If you're watching this, you are probably exercising. But if you're not, please get moving right away, because it's the best way to protect your brain. It increases dopamine release. It helps you increase BDNF, which is this neurotropic tropic factor in your brain that helps you restore brain cell connections. And exercise may also improve long-term prognosis, as it increases synaptic strength, which is the connection between your neurons and your brain, and improves your brain health. So you have better motor function, better cognitive function, better mood, better motivation and apathy. So please, if you're not exercising and you want your cognition to be preserved, go start exercising right now. Okay, moving on to topic 8, which was very interesting. It was asking the question, does the appendix contribute to the development of Parkinson's disease? And the research is still not super clear, but here is what we learned today. First and foremost, the takeaway is don't rush out to get an appendectomy, because that's not actually what is going to help you. If you've already got a diagnosis of Parkinson's, it's not recommended. The research showed that there was a high concentration of aggregated alpha-synuclein in your appendix for all ages and all conditions. So that aggregated alpha-synuclein is what's found in Lewy bodies. It's kind of this crumpled protein that's really associated strongly with the development of Parkinson's when it's found in your brain. But what this research discovered was that this folded protein that's toxic to your brain is actually in everyone's appendix in high concentrations. And so what they found by looking at historical data was that people who had an appendectomy in their early 20s, decades before their Parkinson's came on, if you had an appendectomy decades before Parkinson's symptoms were seen in your specific case, it likely helped you push back the first day of your symptom progression. So I think I'm trying to find the stat here. Actually didn't write it down, but an appendectomy delays the age of Parkinson's onset. So you have a decreased risk of Parkinson's by 19% for those who had an appendectomy. So more or less, if you hadn't your appendix taken out in your early 20s, decades before Parkinson's, you're 19% less likely to have a development of Parkinson's. But if you do have Parkinson's, it delayed the onset of symptoms. I think it was around 3.5 years. So the research is still ongoing about the appendix, and it's really interesting that the same cells that are found in your brain that make it toxic to your brain for Parkinson's is actually maybe a good thing in your appendix. So more research to come on that, but that's the update on the appendix and Parkinson's. Now we are getting into my favorite workshop of today. Gotta take a drink. Just talking too much today. I'm also the last person in the hall, I think, except for the security guard who's really waiting to kick me out. Okay, our last topic, how you must think about nutrition for Parkinson's. So Dr. Lori Mishley, who you all know that I love, doing great work out in Seattle at the Seattle Integrative Medicine Clinic. If you don't know her, look her up. I'll put her link to her website in the description below. But she talked about nutrition for Parkinson's, and are there nutrients that are protective for Parkinson's disease? And her first point was that nutrition goes beyond food. And she said that it's critical to think about humans as parasites of the earth, and we consume all of these nutrients that help us function. And yes, there are nutrients in food, but we're also talking about oxygen and water, vitamins and minerals and gravity and social connection, and anything that our bodies need to function is a nutrient. So it goes beyond diet, but we did talk a lot about diet, which I will get to here in a second. And her whole philosophy is that Parkinson's, people who have diagnosed with Parkinson's, they need specific nutrients. And again, diet or social or emotional nutrients. So the first thing she really talked about was that malnutrition can be common in Parkinson's. And I wanted to put this at the beginning because I want you to kind of take note, because you may be malnourished and your body may be telling you that you need nutrients more than you even recognize. So malnutrition in Parkinson's is common in patients with the following symptoms: constipation, depression, anxiety, cognitive impairment, and dystonia, which is that muscle cramping. So if you have a lot of those, then you may actually be malnourished, not getting the proper nutrients that you need for your body to thrive. So that brings me into, in your diet, what foods are putting you at increased risk of developing Parkinson's. So if you just want the list of foods that she talked about that help you slow the progression, that's in the next kind of segment. But she did talk about the foods that increase your risk of Parkinson's from her research, which included red meat, dairy, refined grains, desserts and sweets, well water, and pesticides. Those increase your risk of Parkinson's. And then decreasing your risk of Parkinson's was eating lots of fruits and vegetables, legumes, fish, coffee, and tea. And what she really hit on was, she said that we can't just take these foods that increase your risk of Parkinson's and say, well, if those increase your risk, then just stop eating them and that will slow the progression. And she had this analogy where she said, if you had a cold, if you wash your hands to prevent yourself from getting a cold, right? But after you get a cold, how many times do you go and wash your hands? It's the same thing with your diet. So just because something causes the problem doesn't mean that eliminating those will actually fix the problem. So then she talked about what her research is finding after epidemiologically evaluating. It's called clinical epidemiology, but she looked at patients from day 0 of diagnosis and recorded, how they live and correlated it with how fast their progression was going. And she tried to find a pattern in the data of things that are linked to people who progress slower versus people who progress quicker. And here was her list of things that she found. So grab a pen if you want. There's also a picture on our Facebook page where I posted her standing by her slide with all of this information on it if you want to find that. I'll try and link it in the description below. But the foods that are linked to the slowest progression of Parkinson's, according to her research, is fresh fruit, fresh vegetables, nuts and seeds, olive oil, wine, thank goodness, coconut oil, and fresh herbs. And the foods that were linked to the fastest progression of Parkinson's were canned fruits and vegetables, fried food, diet soda or just soda in general, beef, chicken, ice cream, yogurt, and milk. So I know a lot of you love your ice cream, but it is on the list of being linked to faster progression. Pasta and frozen vegetables. And I have a little bit more for you, so don't completely tune out yet, but if you live by anything, living by putting the healthier nutrients in your body food-wise, and starting to eliminate some of those that are linked to faster progression, you're going to be doing yourself so much good. However, Lori Mishley also looked at social health as a nutrient, and I want you to please listen to this because it is so important. She surveyed and found that those of you who answered or confirmed that you said that you have a lot of friends, if you checked true on this true or false box, I have a lot of friends, true, you typically score 177 points better on her scale. And what that really means is she gives everyone a number that's linked to how intense your Parkinson's symptoms are. That's not completely accurate, but that for this explanation, you have a number. Say on this graph, your intensity of your symptoms, the higher it is, the lower quality of life that you have. So say your score is 1,000 on her scale, you typically have a poorer quality of life, versus if you score a 25, you typically have a higher quality of life. So that's her scale. And normal Parkinson's progression, according to her scale, is about 38 points a year, is the average Parkinson's progression as far as worsening symptoms. And again, her research is trying to figure out what people are adding less points every year. Just give me a thumbs up if that makes sense. And so when you have a lot of friends, this social nutrient, you're doing typically 177 points better than the people who say, I don't have a lot of friends. And if you're gaining 38 points every year on average, but having a lot of friends helps save you 177 points, that's a huge differential. And on the opposite, those of you who on her scale, you checked true to the statement, I am lonely, it actually added 354 points on average to your score. So again, higher score is worse quality of life. So her takeaway from that was social health is the single largest predictor of Parkinson's progression. So those of you who are tuning in just to hear the diet side, social health is more important by far than any other factor, even if you're eating healthy. So she said that if you exercise 6 days a week for 30 minutes a day, but you say that you are lonely, it's a wash. That was a huge aha moment for me. So if you are lonely, I put a link in the section below underneath this topic to our online invigorated community. It's free. Just go in there and join and talk to somebody, say hello, because you're going to save yourself so much time, literally. Loneliness is the biggest predictor for Parkinson's progression. So please take that away. That is the golden nugget. I'm handing it to you on a platter right here. Go make friends, eat meals with them that are high in nutrient density, and connect. Okay. Our next two topics really quickly are tips for those who have trouble with food preparation. So some of you have fatigue, some of you may have tremors, just a weak arm. She recommended trying out a meal delivery system. Actually, that's not quite fair. Someone asked if she recommended meal delivery services, something like Blue Apron, or for vegans, the Purple Carrot. So these companies pack meals and prepare all the food, like fresh vegetables and fruits and whatnot, put them all into a box and mail them to you, so you can just take everything out, put it all together, and then cook it. So I'll also put a link to in the description box below, so that you can access those as well. And then we talked about supplements for Parkinson's disease that are linked to slower progression and faster progression. And according to her research right now in 2019, supplements that are linked to faster progression are iron supplements, and the supplements that are linked to slower progression are fish oil, coenzyme Q10, glutathione, and a turmeric supplement. So I hope that is good guidance for you if you're looking at the supplement world. So I wasn't able today to do any interviews with any of our Parkinson's friends, so tune in tomorrow for some interviews on the Facebook page. You can always go over to Facebook and like our page to make sure you get notified of when I go live with some awesome people who are here at the conference. at invigoratept.com/Facebook. So that's it for me for day 2. If you found this recap valuable, please hit that like button, share it with someone, share it with one other person. They can be your new friend so that you're not lonely and you have friends and you just boosted your Pro-PD score, your Parkinson score by a significant amount. So I'll be back tomorrow for day 3's recap. If you didn't have a chance to watch day 2, I'll put it over here in the video so that you can watch day 1 actually, and make sure that you subscribe to our channel for future videos. So thanks for watching, and I will see you tomorrow. Mata ashta.